Ben here from Bounce Financial. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how you can use our budget calculator. Now it's currently December 2019. We're bearing down on the end of the year. And this month at Bounce Financial, we're talking about planning for next year, coming up with our goals, setting up our budgets and automating our finances to achieve those goals. And the first step in doing that is doing a budget and coming up with a bit of a plan as to how we're going to do it. Now, I'm going to step through today our budget calculator that we developed and that we use in our advice process. Now, I'll put a link to the Dropbox where you can download it yourself. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Always happy to provide this. We find it's really helpful to step through this, and it's relatively user-friendly. The reason we built it is because we just couldn't find something that was equivalent out there. So we built our own one to do this. So, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to step you through our budget calculator. So I'll just move my little box there. Okay, so this is what the budget calculator looks like. It's pretty simple, but it is very powerful. So if you're familiar with Excel, there's a number of tabs down here as to each step of the process. Now, it starts with asking about your income. It moves on to some of your expenses of the house, moves on to debts, moves on to self-care, pets, education, health, children, a couple more, miscellaneous, and then it gives you some results and then some extended results. And we'll talk through what they mean. We are in the process of updating this at the moment. So depending on when you watch this video, you may come across a budget calculator that looks slightly different to this with a little bit more interactivity, but it still follows the basic premise. Okay, so the way to get started with the budget calculator. So the first thing you want to do with the budget calculator is put in how much income you get. Now, many people know how much they earn per year. So, you know, they might be able to say to me, well, I make $120,000 per year, but they don't know what their after-tax amount is. So what you can do is you can go to a website called paycalculator.com.au. and you can plug in your pay, and from there you can work out how much you receive after tax every fortnight. So let's put in $100,000 just to keep it really rounded. Now, it's important to note that this is exclusive of superannuation. So some employers, they will give you a figure as to how much you earn inclusive of superannuation. This is exclusive. If the only figure you know is inclusive of superannuation, you can tick this box here, which will change the figure to reflect the fact that superannuation is included in the amount you've put in. Okay, so if you earn $100,000 a year, annually you will receive in the hand approximately $74,283. This means that your total taxes, inclusive of Medicare levies and things like that, will be approximately $25,717, which is a lot of money. Tax is a big portion of our incomes and something we always need to be thinking about, and we're thinking about as part of the financial advice process. Okay, so if you earn $100,000 per fortnight, you would receive approximately $2,826. Now, the numbers can get a little bit strange because in a year, there actually is a greater than 26 fortnights per year. We have set the budget calculator up on that basis, but the point is to be close, right? The point is not meant to be down to the last cent, and this is close enough for us. So let's say you earn $2,826 a fortnight. Let's go back to our budget calculator. I forgot that number already, 2826. Okay, and then you put in your pay, 2826. Awesome. Okay, now you put in your partner's take-home pay. For simplicity reasons, let's assume that you both earn $100,000, which should mean that you have $5,652 every fortnight coming in after tax. Now from here you can put in things like bonus overtime, earning from investments if you're taking that income, rental income, and any Centrelink government benefits that will go in there. And again, that's on a per fortnight basis. All right, so now we know how much income's coming in. We need to start thinking about how much money's going out. So the first is to start with home expenses. So we've got your rent and your mortgage, and usually people know this, so let's assume every fortnight it's $1,000. Groceries. Now, for a lot of people, they don't know how much they spend on groceries, particularly if you're doing a lot of smaller shops. So what we need to do is kind of estimate from here. When it comes to budgeting, I always encourage people to overestimate rather than underestimate, because if at the end of the day you just have a bit of excess money saved, that's not a bad outcome. Whereas if you are short money, it will be disastrous for your budget. So let's just assume this is a normal family. Maybe they spend about $350 a week on groceries, so $700 a fortnight. And that may seem like quite a lot, but you'll be very surprised at all those little shops and how they do add up. Telephone, again, this is something that most people tend to know. You're on a contract and you know that perhaps your contract is $100 a month. So fortnightly, that's $50 a month, times that by 2, so $100 for both members of the couple. Internet, again, it might be $70 a month, so we say 35 for a fortnight. Okay, we'll come to Foxtel Netflix. So this is where we put all our streaming services in there. So very common, we'll see Foxtel, Netflix, and Spotify. You may have Audible or something else like that. But let's just assume that this person has Netflix and Spotify. Netflix is about $15, Spotify is about $15 a month, so that's $30 a month. Divide that by 2 for the fortnightly, so we come to 15. They don't have a cleaner, but you can put in your cleaning costs here. We have paper deliveries. This is becoming less common over the last couple of years, but that's still something that people do. And then you can put in any other home expenses. Excellent. Okay, so then we come to our annual expenses. So you'll be able to look at your bills and get a bit of an idea as to how much you spend. Now, if it's the case that you don't want to do that, and for a lot of our clients, we tend to try and estimate some of these things. It's probably a fair assumption to assume that your electricity is somewhere in the range of $2,000 a year. Same with water bills, same with rates. Now, water bills and rates obviously only apply to people who own their own home. If you rent, then you're likely not paying rates, and you may be paying water bills. It depends on your arrangement with your landlord. So that's something to take note of. Maintenance. So houses require upkeep, and even if you're in a rental, you may be doing certain things that will require upkeep. We see people's transactions, so we see a lot of money get spent at Bunnings. That's a big one. You've hit adulthood when you are at Bunnings every weekend, which I know I am. So generally, as a maintenance figure, we usually range it between about $1,000 to $2,000 a year. So let's put 2,000. Home contents insurance. Again, you can look at your bills to work out how much this is. If you just have contents insurance as a renter, then perhaps it's going to be less, but let's assume $1,000. Pool expenses, so pools cost a bit. Let's assume this person has a pool, so $500. And then garden expenses, let's assume another $500 for garden expenses. And you'll notice that where the yearly total is coming up here, so we've got $58,100 in yearly costs. Which is quickly adding up. People underestimate how much they spend, and this budget calculator is actually a really good way of identifying that and coming up with plans around it. Cool. All right, so then we move on to debts. Now, this we've already addressed your mortgage and home expenses, so you don't need to think of that debt. A debt that is not usually included in this is help debt or HECS debt. Usually what we do is in our income screen, we will reflect the lower salary after help is taken or HECS debt is taken out. But in this one, let's say we've got a credit card debt that needs to be paid fortnightly. Let's say there's no personal loans or no investment property loans. Cool. All right, let's move on to self-care. Okay, so self-care for us is those expenses like hairdressers, nails, lashes, those sorts of costs that come up. We're not including things like uh, shampoo or anything like that, that's been caught up in our grocery budget as we understand it. Okay, so let's assume, and I always get lost on these figures because as a man, we don't have these, but manicures and things like that, let's assume 50 fortnightly, let's assume 50 for facials fortnightly. We won't do massages. When it comes to haircuts, you probably generally have an idea of how much you spend on haircuts. Haircuts are expensive, particularly for women, if they're regularly getting their hair cut or they're getting their hair dyed quite regularly. So it's really worth identifying for your particular family what your costs are. So let's just assume they're $2,000 for the family. We've put in Botox and laser treatments as well. Really, I mean, the purpose of this is to offer some prompts of some things that may be coming out that you're not thinking about. So, Botox, for example, may be relatively infrequent, so you're not really thinking about it, but you actually do it more than you realize. So it's hopefully just prompting you to think about these expenses that come up in the year, but obviously you can put in any expenses that are unique to you, right? So, enter details, you can write them in and then plug them in. So let's leave that blank for the moment and move forward. Okay, pets. So again, what we do is we break this up into fortnightly and yearly expenses. The reason we do that is things like pet food and stuff. Think about it. Like the idea of going, how much money do you spend on pet food in a year is actually a bit of a challenging thing to do. Whereas a yearly vet check, that's a common yearly expense. So that's why we break it up like that. So let's assume that we spend $50 a fortnight on food, 50 on pet insurance. Again, you're going to know how much that is for your particular pet. Yearly vet check, that's 500. Heartworm treatments, so I'd say 200. Vaccinations, if you're getting vaccinations for your pet. Dental checks, things like that. So let's leave that where it is. It's about $3,300 for the pet for the year. Education. Again, so this is not children's education. This is adult education that you're doing. We do have a tab here for children. So if you're studying, if you're doing anything for work, if you've got textbooks, this is a good place to put those in. Let's assume that our person doesn't have any education costs and move on from there, but you can plug those details in. Cool. Health. Okay, so again, we break this up into fortnightly expenses and yearly expenses. So fortnightly expenses are things like gym membership. Let's assume our couple spending $40 a week, $200 $200 a month each. Let's assume they do CrossFit, which is what I do, and I spend a silly amount of money on gym memberships. Medication, let's put $40 a fortnight. Usually, particularly the female, the couple, they are going to have regular medication costs. These are things like the pill and things like that need to be incorporated into medication. Health insurance, again, it depends on your unique situation, your family. Usually health insurance premiums are somewhere up towards the $300-400 a month. So let's just assume it's $150 for this couple. If you receive any personal training, that's something you can put in there, or any other expenses that are sort of health related. Now, in the annual expenses, we have life insurances. So for a lot of our clients, they will recommend life insurances be paid for out of superannuation, and that allows them to reduce their tax payable on those policies, but also to not inhibit their cash flow. But there are some insurances that can't be paid for out of superannuation, or the benefits that you want can't be achieved by paying for it through superannuation. So life insurances, let's just say they spend, let's say $1,000. Medical fund. So we like to just have an amount set aside for medical costs. Medical costs come up infrequently, and it's something that we want to budget for it, right? If you don't spend your budget, that's great. Just means you have excess money. If, however, you don't budget for something, you're going to find yourself short, and that's an issue. So we usually like to say about $1,000 for each person in the family. So let's just put 2,000. Okay, children. Cool. So the children, again, we've broken up into fortnightly and yearly. Childcare, again, childcare is very unique to your situation. I dare say you're going to know how much you pay in childcare. We like to put in the after Centrelink rebate figure, just to make it a bit easier. So let's just pick a number out of the air. But usually what I'll do is calculate, how many days they go and how much it costs. We've put in children's sports. So let's just assume that's $50 a fortnight. Sports. And then we've got the annual children expenses, so school fees, start of school year expenses, particular health fees to your child. So your child may have a particular need to see a doctor, like perhaps as a learning disability or something that you're regularly spending money on. This is the place to put those sorts of things. And then children's clothes. Now, children's clothes obviously vary based on their age. The younger they are, generally the less you'll spend on them. But let's just assume, let's go $1,500. And they're in daycare in my thing. So let's make daycare a little bit higher to make it more reflective of what it would cost. So $80 is a pretty standard amount. Let's say 5 days, and then times that by 2. Let's say 2 children, and then times by 2 for the fortnight. Let's say $1,600. Let's do children's sport a little bit higher. Health fees, we'll put a bit in there, just for extra costs. Cool. All right, and as you can see, there's $46,200 per year for children, so that adds up pretty quickly. Okay, transport. Okay, so petrol. So generally you'll have an idea of how much you spend on petrol. Again, this really depends on if you're commuting to work by way of train or bus, or whether you're driving, whether you have 2 cars, things like that. So let's just assume $100 a fortnight. Let's assume $100 for train, bus and fares. Tolls and parking. So again, this depends on where you live. So if you're in Sydney or Melbourne, tolls are very much a large portion of your life. Brisbane, not so much. However, it is a cost. So we're going to just do $20. Car loans, if you have any car loans. We have Uber here. Obviously, that includes taxi as well. Very modern to always assume it's an Uber instead of a taxi, but it depends on how much you travel. Again, that's quite variable. Let's put $50 a fortnight. If you do any car washes, anything like that. Moving on to annual expenses, so car insurance. Again, if you have 1 car or 2 cars, that's going to move the dial. Let's assume they have 2 cars and it's $1,000 each. Registration, usually about $700 in Queensland. I think it's like $770 or something now, depending on the type of car you have. And then car services, again, let's assume they're $1,000 each. Miscellaneous. Okay, so entertainment, fun, spending money. So this is things like going out for coffee, buying lunches, all those fun discretionary expenses that aren't necessarily included in your thing. As a general rule, it depends on where you are in life, right? If you're putting anything less than $100 per person, you really need to be considering whether that's the actual amount you spend. So that can be done. I'm not saying that that's a figure that can't be done. It's just, if you're spending less than $100 per person, you'll be noticing it. You'll be very actively tracking your money to make sure that you're not overspending, because it's very easy to do. Coffee's at $6 now. So you buy a couple of coffees, buy some lunches, you'll quickly exceed it. So let's assume that each spouse is going to spend $150 a week. So that's $300 between the 2 of them for the week, which is $600 a fortnight. Oh no. Oh, here we go. I thought my computer was going to crash then. We put in dry cleaning as well. So if you have to dry clean every fortnight, That's something that you need to be aware of. This is a more variable amount, so if you can plug in any details that are specific to you. Annual expenses, again, we've got prompts here, so whether you're a member or you've got any associations, this is good for your union expenses if that's something that comes up for you. Clothing, again, try not to underestimate how much you have to spend on clothing, particularly if you have professional jobs. Clothing is a cost of life, right? It is something you need to show up to work every day, looking appropriate and making sure that you've got good clothes that reflect the workplace you work in. So don't be afraid to put some money in there to make sure that you're covering the costs because you're going to spend it anyway, right? Charitable expenses. So even if you're not regularly giving to charity, things will come up during the year, which means that you may be giving to charity, you may be asked by a friend to donate to Movember or something like that. So it's always worth at least putting some money in there. Obviously, if you are contributing on a monthly basis to charity, you'll be able to come up with a more set figure. Holidays. Okay, so we should always include some money for holidays, even if you're not intending to take a holiday. This is because if you are going to take some time off work and you're probably going to spend more in that period, right? It's just going to happen. For most of our clients, holidays are a massive priority to them, and this is a big part of their budget. So let's assume they're going to go overseas and it's $8,000, right? Obviously, it depends on where you're going to go, but emergency set aside. So we usually like to put some money aside just in case something goes wrong. Your dryer breaks, your fridge breaks, one of your appliances break. Cool. Gifts. I've seen a lot of budgets in my time. I've never seen anyone actively plan for gifts, which is fascinating. It's one I think we forget because it's so infrequent, but gifts are a huge part of our budget. So depending on who you're buying for, whether you spend a lot on the kids or whether you have an extended family that expects gifts over Christmas, is a common thing in your family. It's right to assume that that's going to come up. Cool. The other thing we like to do if you've got capacity is to look at overflow. So overflow is sort of going, okay, well, we've budgeted everything down. We've worked out how much life costs to live, but things come up. And is there room in the budget to have an overflow? Let's have a look. So I'll put that in. Cool. All right. So we have inputted all the expenses now. So we started with income, we went to home expenses, debt, self-care, pets, education, children, transport, miscellaneous. Now, if anything else has been missed, you can obviously put that in miscellaneous and that should hopefully carry through. Okay, so let's move to results. Okay, so you will see that this family that earns $100,000 each is spending $174,000. And hang on, is that right? Let's just check. No, that's right. It still seems like so much money, doesn't it? Cool. Yeah, that's right. Awesome. Okay, so you will see that they are spending $174,460, which means they have they're $27,000 short of earning the money they need to spend, they need to earn to do that, right? And that's what I like about this calculator is you can have a look at where your money's going and you can adjust. Now, a lot of people, when they start making budgets, what they do is they come up with what I call an aspirational budget, the thing that they want to do. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. The best way to make a budget is to actually write down what you're spending. Come to this screen, work out whether this is an achievable thing, whether perhaps, maybe you do need to cut down expenses, and then from there, cut them down. And that way, if you try and start just trying to cut down your expenses, you end up with this budget that you're just never going to stick to. So let's try and get this budget to balance. So let's bring down entertainment fund spending money. So that, let's assume it's $100 each. And so that comes to 400. That should move the dial a little bit. Now, our holidays, we're probably won't be able to take an international one this year, so let's put a local one in there, and let's pull down clothing a little bit, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, so we're $17,000 off. So let's look at some of our key major expenses here. So home expenses is huge. Let's look at that and see what we got. Okay, so the mortgage is $500 a week, so $1,000 a fortnight. Groceries is quite high, but again, this is a family of four, so there's not a whole lot we can do. Telephone is high, can't change that. Internet is high, can't change that. Electricity, water bills, rates, home contents, pools. Okay, all right. So I think unfortunately that's where we're going to be with that. That's the decision that was made to buy the house, so that's where we're at. Debts, again, we've got to pay off our debts. So assuming $1,300 is going off the credit cards. Cool. All right, self-care. Okay, so if we remove perhaps our manicure, which I'm sure my fictional wife in this scenario is going to be disappointed about, and remove facials. Let's see what that has done to it, whether that's brought us down. Okay, so again, 14,000. Where else can we cut? It's starting to get a bit vicious now. I probably didn't think this scenario through as much. Cool. Gym membership. Let's get rid of it. That puts us in 9,000. Okay. Fortunately, we'll move charity down to 250. We'll set the holiday to 2,000, and we're going to get rid of the overflow because now we need to stick to our budget, right? Cool. So results, 5,000. Jesus. Okay. Let's change gifts to 1,000. Put our emergency set aside to 1,000. Our holiday to 500. Unfortunately, things are going to be very unpleasant for them. Okay, dry cleaning's got to remain. Let's say 300 a fortnight. So this means there will be $75 each per fortnight, which is going to be a tough budget. Cool. All right. So you can see now that this now balances. So the income coming in is after tax $5,652 a fortnight, and the cost going out is $146,000 a year. So excess left for savings is $842. Now, optimally, you would want more. Like as a savings amount, you really want to be working towards 20-30% of your after-tax salary is going to savings, because that's what we want to do. But for this family right now, it's very, very tight. So that's just where we're at. Okay, cool. This brings us to the last screen, which is extended results. So we use this for the purpose of providing our financial advice. So this is a breakdown of their home expenses fortnightly and annually. And what we'll do is we'll copy and paste this and put this into your advice. Obviously take out the zeros to give you a good summary of where your budget should be, right? As part of our financial advice, what we do then is we recommend setting up automating your finances so you can stick to these, right? And the way we approach this is by using a number of segmented different accounts. So the two main accounts that we use are your everyday spending and your main bills hub. Now, your main bills hub is where all your money goes in. It's your bills account. Your bills are direct debited out of that, and that's how much it is. And so every fortnight, we want $4,600 remaining in that account. So income comes into it, we want $4,600 remaining. Now from here, money is transferred to the everyday spending account, and that is the spending account which addresses your personal spending, your groceries, children's activities, and children's activities, children's activities, fund spending money, groceries. That's it. The reason we have them separate, the reason we separate these out, right, is your everyday spending. So groceries, children's activities, and entertainment fund spending money, you need to be thinking about this near every day, right? coffee you purchase, every lunch you purchase, we need to figure out whether that fits within our budget. And by segmenting off that money, it means you only have to focus on that particular problem. If we just had it in a big pooled account, you've got to be thinking about your whole budget, and it's very, very challenging to do. The reason groceries is in there too is I find, and I've done this personally, is when you're trying to cut down your spending, sometimes what you do is you start overspending in groceries. Suddenly, if you're not going out to dinners or lunches or whatever, you start spending a lot more on groceries to compensate. And so we want to make sure that we're not overspending in these areas. Now, your main bills hub. So your main bills hub is the things like your rego, everything else that you don't need to be thinking about every day, but you do need to be keeping your costs low. So that's how much goes into this main bills account. Okay, now I'll skip over this and I'll deal with this one last. We also like to recommend having a separate holiday account. Again, we had to really cut their holiday, unfortunately. Again, this is just a random sort of approach, but it will be personalized for you. But their holiday, let's assume they're putting $19 away a fortnight, so they can have $500 extra during that period, which is, it's important to do. And then here what we do is we have what's left over for investing or saving. So you recall there wasn't a lot of capacity to do that for these people. But, depending on your figures and how much you spend, you may have a lot more capacity to save, or hopefully you got a lot more capacity to save. So $32 a fortnight is going into this account, and you should have $842 a year. So that is our budget calculator and the way we approach developing it for the purpose of our financial advice. So what we do when we're putting together advice for people is we will go through this exercise after we've sought information from them. We'll work out what their capacity to save is. And from there, what we'll do is we'll recommend changes. So we may recommend things like cutting your expenses, as I did here, to allow you to balance the budget. You never want to be going into a negative. But, we might not make recommendations if you're saving a lot of money, and that's fine. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll recommend how to segment out those accounts. And then what we're going to do is move to things like, okay, well, once you've got that capacity to save, what do we do with it? So we'll look at things like investing that money. We'll look at things like, can we put extra onto your offset account, and how's that going to affect, how much is that going to reduce your mortgage, and how much interest you pay? What can we do to grow your wealth? But we need to go through these basic steps first to understand what your capabilities are, to then go through and invest and do all the fun, exciting things. Okay, so like I said, I will put a link to this in this video. If you can't find it, or if you're having any problems with it, please reach out to me. My email is ben@bouncefinancial.com.au, or send us a message on Instagram. We're always responsive, and I can send it through to you. No problems at all. Awesome. That is my summary today of our budget calculator. I hope it was helpful, and I hope you got something from it. Let me know how you go. If you have any questions, please let me know, and have a great day, everyone. Cheers.